Hello everybody, this is Dr. Vishal Trivedi from Department of Biosciences and Bioengineering, IIT Guwahati. And what we were discussing about the living organisms. So if you recall, in the previous lecture we discussed about the classifications of the living organisms, and in that context we discuss about that how the organisms are being classified into the different kingdoms and what are the different properties of these kingdoms and so on. And subsequent to that we have also discussed about the different types of ways in which the people are keeping the nomenclature of these organisms and so on. So, to better understand the classifications of the living organisms, we took the example of the two different classes of or two different kingdoms, how we can be able to classify the kingdom. As you know that these living organisms actually are very much diversified. They are very much varying in terms of sizes, in terms of shapes, in terms of many other properties. So, because of that you have to adopt a certain criteria on which you can be able to classify the any living organism which is present in that particular kingdom. To understand this aspect, we are taking the two kingdom as an example. So, we are going to discuss about the animal kingdom, and then we are also going to discuss about the plant kingdom. So, let us discuss about the different criteria on which the animal kingdom is being classified. So, we have the set of classification. So, what you can see here is the animal kingdom. So, the criteria for making a classification of the animal kingdom. So, we have 5 criteria, because the animals could vary from very tiny ant to a very giant elephant. So, that is why you cannot just have a simple criteria. You can have the different types of criteria on which you can be able to classify the different types of animals. So, what you have the level of organizations, you have the symmetry, then you have the type of the developmental stages like diploblastic or triploblastic organizations, and then we have the segmentations and as well as the notochord. So, let us understand each and all these criteria for classifications, and then keeping these criteria in mind, how the classification is being done. So, let us first start with the level of organizations. So, level of organizations, if you recall, we were discussing about the level of organizations. It could be of different types. So, you can have the cellular level of organizations. So, these are the organism where only the cells are present. The classical examples are the sponges. These organisms have the cells which are in loose aggregates. Then we have the tissue level organizations. So, what is tissue? Tissue is the collection of the specialized cells isolated from the other tissue by the membranous layer. So, tissue level organizations examples are the coelentrates, and the cells doing the same function from the tissue, which means if you have a particular type of tissue, all the cells are coming together, and that is how they are going to perform that particular functions. Then the tissues are actually going to come together to give you the organs. So, organs level organizations, classical example is the platyhelminthes. The tissues are organized to give you an organ which is specialized for a particular function. Classical example is, for example, in humans we have the liver, right. So, liver is actually performing a function, but that has a different types of tissues which are coming together to give you an organ. And then we have the organ level of organizations. So, the classical example is annelids, arthropoda and all the higher animals, where the organs has associated to form the functional system with specific physiological functions. Organ systems show variation from the animal to animal. For example, one of the classical system is circulatory system. Circulatory system could be of open circulatory system, or it could be a closed circulatory system. We are going to discuss all these about when we are going to discuss about the specific class of animals or specific phylum. So, let us understand about the another criteria for the classifications. So, another criteria of the classification is the symmetry. So, what is symmetry? Symmetry means the similarity in shape, size and the number of parts on the opposite side of a medial line or the plane. For example, this is a ball, right. if you have a ball and it has faces like this, you can easily be able to draw a line, and on this line you can be able to have the two halves ready, right. Similarly, you can also have the alphabets. You can have an alphabet like A. So, if you want to make the symmetry, you can actually be able to draw the symmetry in this A if you cut it from the center, which means if you keep a mirror here actually, so you can understand, right, if you keep a mirror here, this portion, the image of this portion and image of this portion is actually going to superimpose to each other, and that is called as the symmetry. Similarly, we have the symmetry in the butterfly, we have the symmetry in these particular type of shapes. For example, if you take an example of this object, for example, if you have an word like shape, what you see here is this, right, S. So, in the S you do not have the symmetry, whereas H you can easily have a symmetry. You can have the two-way symmetry, either you can have the longitudinal symmetry or the vertical symmetry, because this portion is going to be identical. Similarly, A, we have taken an example of A. So, A is also can be divided into two halves. P does not have a symmetry, because by any mean you cannot be able to divide that particular alphabets into two equal half. Similarly, E also has a symmetry, because it has a horizontal symmetry from this portion and this portion is going to be identical to each other. So, this is called as symmetry. The symmetry is where you can have the similarity in shape, size and number of parts on the opposite side of a median line or the plane. The plane could be horizontal, the plane could be vertical, or the plane could be radial. So, based on this, you can have the different types of symmetry. You can have organisms which does not show any kind of symmetry. For example, you can have the organisms like so this is like, you can see this is a symmetrical organism, right. You have this portion and this portion is symmetrical in nature, whereas this is the organism which does not have a symmetry, because this portion is bigger and this portion is smaller. So, there will be no symmetry. So, there are organisms which do not have symmetry, and you cannot divide their body into two equal parts. One of the classical example is sponges and the snail. Then we have the radial symmetry. The radial symmetry is that if you cut it into the radial form, for example, from the center, if you cut it into radial form, you are actually going to generate the identical portions. So, they can be divided into two equal parts through any plane. All the cuts passes through the center and appear like a radii. For example, the hydra, starfish and sea anemones. Similarly, you can have the bilateral symmetry. Bilateral symmetry means if with the symmetry plane is actually going to divide the object into two different parts. So, animal can be divided into two equal parts through one plane. Classical example is dog, the frog and the humans. So, this portion and this portion is actually going to be divided. For humans also, we can easily get the bilateral symmetry from the center of our nose, right. So, if that plane you use, that is actually going to divide. So, the third criteria is the developmental stages. So, you can have the two different types of membranes for the in the different developmental stages. So, the mass of cells during the developmental stages get arranged either into the two membrane or to the three membrane stage as the germinal layer. So, you can have the organism which are diploblastic animals like the two layers. So, where you can have the outer ectoderm, right, outer ectoderm and the inner endoderm, which are separated by the mesoglia. One classical example is Cnidaria. So, this is the diploblastic animals, right, where you can have the ectoderm and the endoderm, which are clear layers, but they are separated by a mesoglia. Similarly, you can have the triploblastic animals. So, triploblastic animals are going to have the three layers as the germ layer, where you can have the outer ectoderm and the inner endoderm and the middle mesoderm. So, this is going to be a clean and clear middle layer. So, you can have the three layers. One this is called the ectoderm, the inner side it is called endoderm, and the middle one is called as the mesoderm. The classical example is the platyhelminthes, and all the higher animals beyond that is actually being considered to be a triploblastic animals. Then we have the segmentations. So, you can have some animals are being classified based on the segments. So, you can have the segments like There are segments which are actually going to cut the animal's body. So some animals, the body is externally and internally divided into segments with a serial repetition of at least some organ. For example, in earthworm, the body shows this pattern called the metameric segmentations, and the phenomena is known as the metamerisms. So that is what it is going to happen when you are going to have the different types of segments. Then we can have the notochord. So the notochord is a rod-like structure, and it is made up of the tightly packed vacuolated cells which runs along the mid-dorsal line. Animals showing a vertebral column are called as the vertebrates, right? Animals not showing a vertebral column are called as the invertebrates. So animals are classified into the chordata and non-chordata based on the presence or the absence of the notochord. So this is the notochord, where you have a rod-like structure made up of the tightly packed vacuolated cells, and based on this the organisms are going to be divided into two parts. Either they can be having the notochord, or they will not going to have the notochord. If they don't have the vertebral columns, then they are called, if they don't have the vertebral column, then they are called as the invertebrates. If they have the vertebral column, then it is called as the vertebrates. Then the last is body cavities. So animals can have the different types of body cavities, and based on the body cavity also it can be also divided. So body cavity is a space between the body wall and the alimentary canal. The function of the body cavity is that it is going to provide the cushion to the organs, right? You can have, for example, in a humans, you can have the cranial capacity, the cranial cavity. The cranial cavity is actually going to house the delicate organ like the brain. Similarly, you can have the thoracic cavity. Thoracic cavity is like this just cavity, right? Where you can actually be able to house the lungs, right? And then you can have the abdominal cavity, where you can have the different types of alimentary canal and all other kinds of organs. And then on the back side you can have the spinal cavity. That spinal cavity is actually going to hold the spinal cord. And then you can also have the pelvic cavity. The pelvic cavity is actually going to hold the urethra and all other kinds of delicate organs. And then we have the abdominopelvic cavity, which is actually going to have the kidney and all other organs. It allows the internal organs to grow and move independently from the outer body wall. So based on the body cavity, the organisms can be divided into different parts or different types. They can be acoelomates. Acoelomates are the animals which do not have any body cavity. These spaces between body wall and the alimentary canal is filled with the parenchyma. For example, the platyhelminthes. So in the platyhelminthes are acoelomates because they don't have the space between the body wall and the alimentary canal. So this is, you see, this is the digestive system, this is the alimentary canal, and this is the body covering, right? But in between there is no space which is filled, right? This is a space which is filled, right? So there is no body cavity. Then we have the pseudocoelomates. The pseudocoelomates are the animals which show false body cavity, which is lined by the patches of the mesodermal cells. The false cavity is called as the pseudosole. For example, the SK helminthes. So in a pseudocoelomates, you have the outer body covering, and then it is actually having a tissue filled region which is called as the mesoderm, and then it has a digestive tract. So it has a body cavity, but that is called as the false body cavity or the pseudocoelomates. And then we have the coelomates, and the coelomates are the animals which have the true body cavity present in the triploblastic animals. These mesoderm splits into two layers enclosing a body cavity called as the coelom. The cavity is filled with the fluids known as the coelomic fluid. In cockroach, the body cavity is filled with the blood, and the cavity is known as the hemocoel. So coelomates, if you cut a coelomates, what you're going to see here is, this is the body covering, right, which is the outer layer, and then it is going to have the tissue filled region which is called as the mesoderm, and then it is going to have the digestive tract. This is the digestive tract, and outside this digestive tract what you are going to see is actually a coelom, right, or body cavity. So that is what is, so based on the body cavity, the animals are going to be classified according to the whether the body cavity is present or absent. Now keeping all these criteria into the picture, all the organisms which are present in the kingdom Animalia are being divided into the different pairs. For example, based on the level of organizations, it could be a cellular level of organizations or to the tissue level of organizations. So if it is a cellular level of organizations, then you are going to go ahead with the another criteria whether the system is symmetrical or asymmetrical. So if it is a asymmetrical, then you are going to say about body cavity, whether the body cavity is present or not. If the body cavity is not present, then it is considered to be isolomate. And all these three criteria you have going to reach to the first phylum, which is called as the Porifera. So let's discuss about the Porifera. So Porifera, the phylum Porifera are actually the animals. The Poriferas are the all aquatic, mostly marine, except one family which is called as the Spongillati, which lives in the fresh water. So all these animals are found in marine. They are sessile, which means they don't grow, they don't be moving to each other, moving from, and they are sedentary and grow like a plant. So they actually are attaching to a surface, and then they are growing like a plant. The multicellular organisms, they are multicellular organisms with the cellular level of organizations. So there is no distinct tissue or the organs. They consist of the outer ectoderm and the inner endoderm with an intermediate layer of mesenchyme. Therefore, it is a diploblastic animal. So they don't have the triple layer, they don't have the third layer, which is the mesoderm. Instead of that, they have a mesenchyme. Then the contractile vacuoles are present in the some freshwater forms. The sponges possesses a high degree of regeneration, which means even if you take the sponges and if you crush them, they actually have the ability to reorganize themselves to produce the fully functional organisms. The organization of the sponges are grouped into three different types. It could be ascon type, it could be cycon type, and it could be leuconoid type due to the simple and the complex form. There are several examples. You can have Diclethera, you can have cycon, you can have granita, you can have Eucalyptella, and all these. And what you see here is a typical sponge. What you are going to be see that it is attached to a hill or the surface, right? And then it grows like this, and from this side, this is the actually the mouth through which the food is actually entering into the body, and then it is actually filtering the water, and along with the water it actually takes up the whatever the food material is present in that water. So these are the marine animals, except that one family is Spongillati, which is also found in the fresh water. So this is based on this criteria. So if you go with this criteria, it will end up into the phylum Porifera. But if you go with the tissue or the organ level of organizations, then you can have the symmetry. Either it could be a radial symmetry or the bilateral symmetry. In the radial symmetry, you can have the acoelomates, and within this you can have the two different phylum. You can have the Coelenterata, which is called, also called as Cnidaria, or you can have the Ctenophora. So let's discuss about the Coelenterata, and then we are going to discuss about the Ctenophora. Coelenteratas are colonial or the solitary forms. So this means they are going to form in the bunches, or they are going to be formed as individuals. They are sedentary or the free living animals, which means they are actually either be attached to a surface or they could be free living animals. They are mostly marine but could be found in the fresh water like the hydra. Body is readily symmetrical, right? Tissue level, it's a tissue, it has a tissue level organization, except that the cellular level organization present in the Porifera. Then the body cavity is coelentron, helps in the digestion and circulations. It has two different types of bodies. It has a polyps and a medusa, and polyps are the sedentary, whereas the cylindrical life forms. Medusas are the free swimming and the umbrella shaped type. So the organism which are found in the Coelenterata could be either polyps or could be medusa, Polyps are the sedentary and they are cylindrical like forms, so they won't be moving each other, whereas the medusas are the free swimming and the umbrella shapes. There are examples: Physalia, Adamencia, like the sea anemone or the sea pen or the hydra. Sea anemone is a polyp type, whereas jellyfish is a medusa type. So this is just a simple example to show you that what is mean by the polyps and what is mean by the medusa type. Then we have the phylum Coelenterata. So what you see here is a phylum Coelenterata. What you see here is a hydra, where you have, this is a body stalk and it is attached to the surface, right? And this is the gastrovascular cavity. So mouth is surrounded by the tentacles, which helps in the locomotion and capturing the prey. So this is what you see here. This is the mouth, right, where you have the tentacles, right? These tentacles are good enough to catch the prey, and this mouth is actually receiving the water from outside, and then it goes into the gastrovascular cavity, and where the prey what is present inside this water is going to be taken up by the animal. The presence of specialized cells such as syndocytes, which contain the stinging section as a nematocide. These cells help the animal to catch the prey as the nematocide discharge the toxin into them. They have a poorly developed nervous system forming the nerve nets, and their reproduction is both sexual and asexual. Hydra reproduce asexually by producing the buds in the body wall, which grows to miniature adult and break away when they are mature, when a hydra is well fed. So this is what you see here. Hydra is actually reproducing by the budding, where the buds are appearing from the main body, and then these buds are getting pinched off, and that's how they are actually going to be grow as an adult individual. A new bud comes from the every 2 days. Sexual means involving the gametes. Then we have the Cetanophora. So Cetanophora is exclusively, they are marine animals. It has radial symmetry. This is radial symmetry, right? You can actually divide the animal into the as the radii comes. It is a diploblastic animal, so it does not have the mesoderm. These animals are classified as the sea walnut or the comb jellies. They are a spherical body with the external row of cilia. They exhibit the bioluminescence. So bioluminescence is a phenomena where the organism is actually going to produce the light by the light pigments, and that process is called as the bioluminescence. These are the bisexual animals, which means they are going to have the separate male and female, and they are actually be reproduced by the sexual reproduction, and the sexual reproduction by the external fertilization, which means they are going to produce the gametes outside into the water, and that then it is going to be fertilized. Examples are Cetanoplana and the Cleobrachia. Then, so we have discussed about this. Now we come back to the tissue level organizations, and the symmetry is bilateral. So when you have a bilateral symmetry, you have the many organisms, like you have the acoelomates, you have the pseudocoelomates, and then you have the coelomates. So within that you have the acoelomates. So tissue level organizations, bilateral symmetry, and acoelomates. You have the phylum Platyhelminthes. Phylum Platyhelminthes, or the worms actually. So it has the bilateral symmetry animal with a blind sac platyplan. It is triploblastic and the acoelomate, which means it does not have the coelom. It is mostly endoparasitic, so you can see that it has a very well defined suctions, and because of that they can actually be able suckers, right? They can be having a ability to suck the food or the nutrition from the host. Body is ribbon-like, unsegmented, dorsoventral patterned, and covered with the cuticle. Cuticle is a covering which actually makes protects the body from the damages. It is parasitic forms, shows the suckers or the hook for the attachment to the host. There is no digestive system in the parasitic membrane. So because why it does not have the parasitic digestive system, because it actually takes up the digested food. Excretory system is made up of the phloem cells, right? And examples are the tinea solium, the tapeworm, what you see here, right? And the fasciola, which is called as a liver fluid. So Now let's move to the next, and which is the false coelom, right, or the pseudocoelomate. The examples are SK helminthes or the worms. SK helminthes, which are commonly known as the roundworms. Roundworms are mostly parasitic, living in the body fluid of the host. Body is long and cylindrical, which is thread-like. It is bilateral symmetrical animal. They are triploblastic animal with a perivascular cavity, and it has a pseudocoelomate, which means it is actually having a false cavity. And these animals shows the tubes within the tube type body plan. Okay, so you can see here, this is the Scalmanthus, right? And it has a the body wall shows the longitudinal muscle but no circular muscles. The excretion take place by the protonephridia, and roundworms lives an average of 4 months and have a life cycle ranging from as early as the 14 days as long as 80 days depending on the species. Examples are Ascaris, Bucheria and Dracuntus. So this is what you see here is Ascaris, which has the separate male and female. Then it comes to the third one, which is the true coelomates. Within the true coelomates, we have the Annelida, Arthomeda, Mollusca, Echinodermata, Hemichordata, and Chordata. And within the Chordata, you have the all other species, all other things, all other animals like uh, so phylum Annelida. Phylum Annelida, you have these are the earthworm and the leech, right? Phyta they are mostly aquatic, marine or freshwater. Some are terrestrial, burrowing and the tuberculous, sedentary or the free living. Some are commensal and some are parasitic. This means a huge variety of organisms are present within the phylum Annelida. They can be found onto the water, they can be found in fresh water, they can be found in marine, they could be terrestrial, they could be burrowing, which means they will make a dig into the soil and they will remain inside. They could be free living or they could be parasitic. The body is elongated, triploblastic, bilateral, symmetrical, truly coelomates and the vermiform, which means they are worm-like. The body is metamerically segmented, right? What you see here, right? These are segmented, and externally by the transverse groove and internally by the septa into a number of divisions. Each division is called a segment, metamere or the somite. Body organization is of a organ grade body, which means it also contains the organ, right? So as per the body organization's content, it actually contains the organ but not the organ system. The epidermis is of a single layer of columnar epithelial cells covered by the thin cuticle not made up of the chitin. The body wall is contractile or dermomuscular, consisting of the outer muscles and circular and inner longitudinals. Appendages are joined when present, right? So appendages are joined. Locomotory organs are segmentally repeated, chitinous bristle like CT or the kitty embedded in the skin. It may be borrowed by the lateral fleshy appendages or the parapodia. The examples are Nesseris, earthworm and the leech. Then we have the second phylum, which is called as the Arthropoda. So Arthropoda are the largest and the most successful phylum. The Arthropoda is covering approximately 80% of all the animals what is being found on the earth. Arthropodas are solitary and are colonials. They are mostly free living. They are omnipresent and bilaterally symmetrical. Body covered by a tough chitinous cuticle, so they are actually having protections. Body is divided into the three parts: the head, thorax and abdomen. In some animals, the head and thorax are fused to form the cephalothorax. The arthropoda possesses the leg for the crawling, creeping, walking and the wings for the flying. There are examples. Examples are cockroach, butterfly, scorpions, centipede, grasshoppers and ants. This is what you see here, right? You have the insects, right? Different types of insects. you have the cockroach, right, and you have, this is the eyes of the fly, right. The sexes are separate, showing the sexual dimorphism. So you have, this is what you see here, these are two different types of sex, right. This is the female sex organ and this is the male sex organ. Then animals are oviparous and fertilization is internal, right. Development is direct or the indirect, which means in some organism the development is direct, whereas in some cases it is going through the stages of the metamorphosis. In some arthropods like the honeybee, individuals are produced by the parthenogenesis, which means without fertilizations. One of the classical example is that the queen honeybee is actually producing the all other honeybees, right? And sometimes the honeybees are being produced without the fertilizations. Some arthropods are economically important like the honeybee, silkworm, lobster, prawn, crabs, etc. Some arthropods are harmful and the vector for the several diseases like the mosquitoes, centipede, spiders, cockroach. You know that so many diseases are being spread by the mosquito like malaria, chikungunya, dengue and all sort of, right. Similarly, we have the some of the diseases which are being also spread by the cockroaches. So this is all about the discussion up to the arthropoda. Now let's move on to the discussion about the mollusca. So molluscas are the freshwater or the marine animals. Phylum Mollusca. They are essentially aquatic, mostly marine. Few are freshwater and some are terrestrial forms. They may be found as the hidden parasite in the interior of the some animals. So they are actually either free living or they are also being parasitic in nature. They vary in size from the giant squids and claim to be little snail, a millimeter long, right? They have at least two character, reticula and mantle, not found elsewhere. The body is soft, unsegmented except in this particular category, bilateral, symmetrical, coelomate and triploblastic. They have the tissue level organization of the body organizations. The body consists of the head, foot, mantle and the vascular mass. The body is clothed with the one layered often called as the epidermis. The body is commonly protected by an exoskeleton calcareous shell of one or more pieces secreted by the mantle, right? Examples are chiton, octopus, sepia, pila. Now what you see here is the head. Head is distinct, bearing the mouth, eye, tentacles and other sense organs except in Pletkopoda and Scaphoida. The ventral body is modified with a muscular claw-like surfaces. The foot, which is variously modified for creeping, burrowing and soaring. What you see here is actually a unio and it is actually using this foot. So what you see here is this is a foot which actually uses it for prowling. So this is the claw-like surfaces on which it actually slips, right? Mantle or the palladium is a fold of body wall that leaves between the itself and the main body and the mental cavity. The visceral body mass contains the vital organs of the body in the compact form, taking the form of dorsal humps or the dome. The body cavity is hemocoel. The coelom is reduced and represented mainly by the pericardial cavity, gonadial cavity and the nephridia. The digestive tract is simple and the anterior mouth and it is a posterior anus. But in gastropods, scaphoids and the centipods, the intestine becomes a U shape, bringing anus to the anterior portions. The sexes are usually separate, so it is a dioecious animal, which means it has a separate male and female organisms. But some are monoecious, which means they are going to be hermaphrodite. Fertilization is external or the internal. Development is direct or with the metamorphosis to the trachophore stage called as the Veligara larva. So this is what it is showing is here, right? It could be Say for example the male and the female, so male is producing the sperm and the female is producing the ovum, and then they are going through a process of fertilization, and that is forming the larva, and then this larva is eventually going through the developmental stages, and then it is going to produce the juvenile animals, and that juvenile animal is eventually going to develop into the adults. Then we have to talk about the echinodermata or the starfish, where the starfish is present. Uh, so the phylum Echinodermata, these are the spiny skinned animals. They are exclusively marine, solitary, sedentary or free living, conolian and the benthoic. They are radial symmetry with the pentamerous symmetry. So they are having a radial symmetry, right? This is what we have discussed, right? So if you draw a line from the center, you can be able to divide the animal into the equally divided parts. The bodies are sphericals, elongated and star shaped. So these are the several examples. Then body does not have a well defined head, and it has a spiny exoskeleton present made up of the calcareous plate and the presence of a water vascular system. So what you see here is actually a water vascular system in the body for locomotion. This system, the water vascular system, is composed of a canal connecting the numerous tube feet. So what you see here is actually the numerous tubes what is being connected to each other, and the echinodermis move by the alternatively contracting muscles that force water into the tube feet, causing them to extend and push against the ground. So what happens is it has the contracting muscles, and because of that in these tubes it actually fills the water, and then it actually utilizes that to bring the push forces, and that's how the echinodermata actually moves into a particular directions. So that is, then it is relaxing and allowing the food to retract. So it actually fill the water and then remove the water, and that's how it actually moves from the one place to another place. The water enters the water vascular system through an opening called as the medullophyte. The examples of these phylum is starfish, sea urchin, bitter star and the sea cucumber. Now, echinodermatas are carnivorous, which means they are actually feeding on to the other animals, and they mainly feed on the molluscas. So, they actually are feeding on to the other type of molluscas. They move with their arms and the tube feet. The respiration is by the peristomial gills. Circulatory system is largely reduced. It is the open type and the heart is absent. We are going to discuss about the open and closed type. Nervous system is simple with the ring around the mouth and the radial nerve in the arms. Sexes are separate and the fertilization is external and development is indirect. They show a high level of regenerations. So, the sexes are separate, which means the male and female are going to produce their gametes, and then it is going to have the fertilization, which is going to be outside, and then after that it's actually going to go through with the different developmental stages, and ultimately it is actually going to form the adults. So this is all about the different organisms what is being present in the echinodermata. Now following this we have the two class which is called as the hemichordata and the chordata. Hemichordatas are considered to be underdeveloped chordata, or they don't have the well defined caudal vertebra. So hemichordata, these are the exclusive marine animals usually living at the bottom of the sea. They are mostly free living, some may be sedentary. Body is soft, fragile, vermiform and unsegmented. Body is divided into three parts: proboscis, collar and the trunk. Buccal cavity gives rise to a rod-like structure which is considered as the notochord by some scientists. They feed on the microorganisms which are present in the water, and they are spiny skinned animals. The examples are Belanoglossus and the Saccoglossus. So this is what you see here is a hemichordata. It does not contain a well-defined vertebra, and that's why they are also being considered as under the category of invertebrates. Proboscis helps to make the burrow while the entire body brings about the movement. Alimentary canal is complete, it is straight or the U shape. Respiratory occurs by the gills, and the gills are open as the gill slit. Circulatory system is simple and the closed type. The blood is colorless. The nervous system is embedded in the epidermis on the both dorsal and ventral side. The sexes are separate. Fertilization is external and the development is indirect through the free swimming larva. This phylum is the connecting link between the non-chordata and the chordata. So the organism what is being found in the phylum Hemichordata are having a characteristic of both the invertebrate as well as the vertebrates, and that's why they are considered to be a connecting link between the non-chordata and the chordata. So with this we have discussed mostly about the invertebrate animal and as well as the non-chordata. So we have discussed about the invertebrate animal and we have also discussed about the non-chordata. What we have discussed about the different types of criteria to classify the animal kingdom, and then we have taken the examples of the animals belonging to the different phylum based on the how they are being classified using the different criteria. And with this, I would like to conclude my lecture here. In a subsequent lecture, we are going to discuss more detail about the chordatas, where we are going to study about the higher animals like the birds, reptiles, mammals, and so on. So with this, I would like to conclude my lecture here. Thank you.